Good morning. Good morning. Let's talk about something deceptively simple, learning to act as if nothing bothers you. This isn't about denial. It's not about being numb or emotionally distant. It's about training your nervous system to perform, stay composed, and execute with clarity regardless of chaos around you. What we perceive isn't just a reflection of external reality. It's a construction of the brain, filtered through past experience, emotional context, and neural wiring. The phrase, learn to act as if nothing bothers you, hinges deeply on this idea because the brain does not always distinguish between and what we believe is happening. The power of controlled perception lies in our ability to direct that belief and through it shape not only our emotions, but our physical and psychological response to stress. At any given moment, sensory information floods our nervous system, but the brain filters this information selectively, highlighting certain inputs and suppressing others based on relevance and perceived threat. This process is not purely objective. It's driven by systems like the amygdala, which flags emotionally charged content, and the prefrontal cortex, which interprets and regulates that information. What this means practically is that if two people experience the same event, a critical email, a traffic jam, a confrontational colleague, they can have radically different internal responses based on how their brain filters and assigns meaning to that experience. Controlled perception is the conscious of Shaktis shaping this internal response. It doesn't mean ignoring reality. It means asserting cognitive control over how we interpret it. This begins with awareness. Most people live reactively. Something happens, they feel a certain way, and that feeling dictates their behavior. Controlled perception reverses that chain. It introduces a pause, a conscious reframing, where you decide, how do I want to interpret this? This is not positive thinking. It's not fake optimism. It's cognitive control over the stress response. For example, let's say you receive criticism in a meeting. The reactive brain may perceive that as a threat to status or competence, triggering a fight or flight response. Racing heart, defensive thoughts, emotional reactive. A controlled perception kicks in and says, this is feedback. It is data, not danger. That shift alone alters your brain state. The prefrontal cortex is the amygdala's threat signal, reducing the downstream effects on cortisol and adrenaline release. In short, you feel less hijacked and more in command. It's important to recognize that the nervous system doesn't always wait for conscious permission. If something EV seems threatening, even if it's not, your body will prepare for battle. But perception is malleable. You can learn through repetition and intentional framing to reduce the false alarms. Controlled perception builds a buffer between stimulus and response, creating space for more skillful action. This has profound physiological consequences. When you interpret a situation as neutral or manageable, even if it's difficult, your body responds differently. Your breathing slows, your heart rate variability increases, no marker of resilience, and your cognitive function remains intact. You can think clearly, speak calmly, and make decisions under pressure. This is why elite performers in military, athletic stakes professions spend time training not just physical skills, but their response to stress. They are conditioning perception. Neuroscience shows us that top-down control from the prefrontal cortex can rewire how we respond to previously stressful stimuli. But it's a muscle, and like any muscle, it strengthens with use. Each time you act as if nothing bothers you, while remaining aware and grounded, you reinforce neural circuits of calm, clarity, and composure. Over time, what was once an act becomes your default operating mode. One of the most direct tools to aid this process is breath. The brain and body are in constant dialogue, and breath is one of the most immediate ways to shift perception by shifting physiology. A long exhale signals safety to the brain. A calm breath says, we're okay. When your body gets that message, it responds accordingly. So when something threatens to throw you off, don't just think differently, breathe differently. That simple physiological shift will support your cognitive reframe and stabilize your internal state. Another subtle but powerful tool is language. The words you use, even in your internal dialogue, shape perception. If you say, this is overwhelming, your brain takes that as instruction. If instead you say, this is a challenge I'm equipped to handle, your perception shifts. Again, not delusion, just direction. Control perception is not about ignoring problems. It's about maintaining authority over your internal environment. It gives you the ability to stay in command when everything around you suggests otherwise. And in that state of control, not only do you perform better, you train your system to recognize that calm is a choice, not a coincidence. So when we say, act as if nothing bothers you, what we're really doing is practicing the art of regulating perception. You're not pretending. You're training your brain to see the world not through the lens of fear, but through the lens of agency. And that changes everything. Human behavior is not random. It is the output of internal physiological and psychological states. What you do, how you speak, how you hold your body, and how you respond to others are all driven by the internal conditions of your nervous system. This is why the idea that state drives behavior is not just a concept. It's a biological truth. If you want to learn to act as if nothing bothers you, you have to understand how to manipulate your internal state so that your behavior reflects calm, confidence, and clarity even under pressure. Your internal state is shaped largely by the autonomic nervous system, which controls whether you're in a sympathetic fight or flight, parasympathetic rest and digest, or some combination of these states. When you're stressed, anxious, or threatened, your sympathetic system takes over. Heart rate increases, pupils dilate, muscles tense, and your brain prioritizes survival over nuance. In that state, your behavior reflects the biology. You're reactive, short-tempered, defensive, or frozen. You may not even notice that your posture collapses or your tone shifts. This is not about personality. It's about physiology. Now, here's the key insight. The relationship between state and behavior is a bidirectional. While your state drives behavior, behavior can also be used to drive state. You can use your body to tell your brain a different story. This is the essence of learning to act as if nothing bothers you. You're not ignoring discomfort. You're actively regulating your system to behave with composure. And in doing so, you're changing the way you feel. Let's say you're entering a high stress situation where you might be challenged, a performance review, or an intense negotiation. If you walk in with shallow breathing, collapsed shoulders and eyes, your darting eyes, your brain will reinforce a narrative danger. Your behavior confirms your internal state. But if you deliberately change your breath, deep, slow inhales with longer exhales, your physiology starts to calm. If you square your posture, lift your chin slightly, and hold your gaze steady, your body sends cues of safety and confidence back to the brain. This feedback loop adjusts your state, and your behavior begins to reflect poise. This isn't just theoretical. The vagus nerve, which plays a central role in parasympathetic regulation, is directly influenced by breath and posture. When you extend your exhale or engage in diaphragmatic breathing, you stimulate this nerve, slowing heart rate and reducing the release of stress hormones. Your frontal cortex gains better access to executive functions like reasoning and planning. As a result, you can now respond rather than react. All of this starts with a choice to behave differently, even when your internal state feels chaotic. There's a term used in elite training environments, a command presence. It's not about being the loudest or most dominant in the room. It's about exhibiting control. Do people who display command presence know how to regulate their state through deliberate behavior? They control their tempo, speak slowly, and project steadiness. Now, in project steadiness, not they always feel calm, but because they've trained themselves to behave in a way that brings calm. Over time, that behavior sculpts their baseline state. One of the fastest ways to reset your state through behavior is through controlled physical actions. Movement, especially intentional, rhythmic movement, alters your neurochemical profile. Going for a brisk walk, stretching your body, or even engaging in brief physical exertion changes your energy and shifts your state. Likewise, adopting specific facial expressions, such as relaxing your jaw or softening your eyes, can alter emotional tone. These are not superficial gestures. They are tools for nervous system regulation. Another effective tool is voice modulation. When you're calm, your voice naturally becomes slower and deeper. Interestingly, if you deliberately speak in that manner, even if you're not calm, your body will begin to shift to match that output. This is because the brain listens to the signals it receives from the body to determine whether a situation is safe or threatening. Behavior becomes the message. And when the message is, I'm in control, the state begins to mirror that signal. Repetition matters. Each time you change your behavior to influence your state, you reinforce a new feedback loop. Over time, you no longer need to act as if nothing bothers you. It becomes your natural mode. You've trained your nervous system to respond with balance rather than volatility. You don't become emotionally numb. You become emotionally precise. So, if you want your behavior to reflect calm under pressure, start by mastering your internal state. But if your state feels overwhelming, don't wait for it to shift on its own. Change your behavior to change your state. Breathe deliberately. Move intentionally. Speak calmly. Stand tall. These choices signal safety and strength to your nervous system. And with enough practice, your behavior won't just reflect your state. It will define it. The autonomic nervous system, ANS, is one of the most powerful, yet often overlooked drivers of human experience. It controls the automatic processes in your body: heartbeat, respiration, digestion, pupil dilation, things you don't consciously think about, but that shape how you feel and act every moment. To master the art of staying composed under pressure, To truly learn how to act as if nothing bothers you, you must understand how to work with, rather than against, this system. Mastering the autonomic nervous system does not mean controlling every internal signal. It means learning how to influence the levers that shift your internal state from stress to calm, from scattered to focused, and from reactive to responsive. The autonomic nervous system is divided into two main branches, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. The sympathetic branch is often described as fight or flight. It prepares the body for action, heart rate increases, blood pressure rises, attention narrows, and you become more vigilant. This system evolved to help you survive threats. The parasympathetic branch, by contrast, is responsible for rest and digest. It slows the heart, supports digestion, and promotes recovery. These systems are constantly balancing each other, adjusting based on cues from the environment and from your own internal perceptions. You're not either in one or the other, you're always on a spectrum between the two. When you encounter a stressor, whether it's physical danger or psychological discomfort, your autonomic system shifts into high alert. This shift isn't bad, it's essential. You need your sympathetic system to mobilize energy and focus. The problem arises when that system stays activated too long or too frequently. Chronic sympathetic activation leads to fatigue, irritability, poor decision-making, and ultimately burnout. That's why learning to master your ANS isn't just about calming down, it's about learning to move skillfully between activation and recovery, depending on what the situation calls for. One of the most immediate and effective ways to influence the autonomic nervous system is through breathing. While many bodily functions are fully automatic, breathing is both voluntary and involuntary, making it a unique bridge between the conscious and unconscious systems. Specific breathing patterns have measurable effects on your nervous system. A simple example is the physiological sigh. 2 short inhales through the nose, followed by a long exhale through the mouth. This pattern rapidly reduces carbon dioxide in the blood and triggers a parasympathetic response, lowering heart rate and promoting calm. In moments of acute stress, using this tool can bring the nervous system back into balance within seconds. Another method of influencing the ANS is through body posture and muscle tone. When you're under stress, your shoulders rise, your jaw clenches, and your muscles brace. These signals reinforce the idea to the brain that you are under threat. By deliberately softening your muscles, relaxing your jaw, and adopting an open posture, you send a different message to your brain: you are safe. Safety signals reduce sympathetic activation and allow the parasympathetic system to take the lead. Over time, training your body to default to these signals can recondition your nervous system's baseline response to stress. Your visual system also plays a key role in autonomic regulation. When you are anxious or under pressure, your visual focus tends to narrow, a behavior wired into the brain for survival. Narrow vision tells your brain to prepare for threat. However, when you consciously expand your field of vision using panoramic or peripheral vision, you stimulate a calming effect through the brain's circuitry. This is why stepping outside and taking in the view actually works on a biological level. It shifts your internal state toward calm and open awareness. Mastery of the autonomic nervous system also involves reframing your relationship with stress. Many people interpret the physical symptoms of stress, rapid heart rate, sweaty palms, dry mouth, as a problem. But what if you trained yourself to view these sensations as signs of readiness? By labeling arousal as excitement rather than anxiety, research shows that people perform better and recover faster. This kind of cognitive reappraisal doesn't shut off the ANS response. It reshapes your interpretation of it, which in turn moderates the physiological impact. Daily routines also shape your autonomic patterns. Regular exposure to short-term stressors like cold exposure, breath holds, or intense exercise trains your nervous system to respond flexibly. This is called stress inoculation. Just like a muscle becomes stronger under load, your ANS becomes more adaptable under managed stress. The more you train your system to move in and out of activation smoothly, the more control you gain over your state in real time. Ultimately, mastering the autonomic nervous system is about building awareness and using tools to regulate your internal environment. You can't stop stress from happening, but you can train your system to respond with balance, to recover quickly, and to stay clear-headed when others are unraveling. In doing so, you don't just appear as if nothing bothers you, you develop the capacity to actually not be bothered because your system is trained, resilient, and under your command. The way you hold your body and where you place your gaze send powerful signals to your brain and to everyone around you. These signals can either amplify stress or neutralize it. Learning to act as if nothing bothers you is not about suppressing your feelings. It's about influencing your internal state through physical cues, many of which are completely under your control. Among the most immediate and impactful tools for this purpose are eye gaze and posture. They are subtle, often overlooked, but they form the foundation of how your nervous system regulates itself under stress. When you're under pressure, your body naturally shifts into protective patterns. These patterns are ancient and hardwired. Your shoulders rise to protect your neck. Your chest caves slightly inward. Your eyes narrow, focusing tightly on the source of the threat. This behavior comes from deep survival circuits in the brain, particularly in the limbic system and brainstem. While useful in true physical danger, these same patterns often misfire in modern situations. Arguments, public speaking, criticism, where the threat is psychological, not physical. Your visual system is deeply integrated with the autonomic nervous system. When you feel safe, your field of vision expands. You take in your environment broadly and without strain. This panoramic vision is associated with the parasympathetic branch of the nervous system, which promotes calm and recovery. On the other hand, when you feel threatened or anxious, your gaze naturally narrows. This tunnel vision is part of the sympathetic response, preparing you to fight or flee. The key insight is this: you can reverse engineer that process. How do we? If you deliberately widen your gaze by relaxing the muscles around your eyes and taking in the entire visual field. You send a message back to your brain that says there is no immediate threat. This soft gaze can bring a calming effect within seconds. Likewise, where you direct your gaze plays a role in your perceived dominance, alertness, and presence. Looking down signals withdrawal or submission, others, but to your own nervous system. Looking directly ahead with a soft but steady gaze creates a loop of confidence. You don't have to stare aggressively. In fact, a calm, fixed gaze with intermittent scanning of the environment is more effective. It reflects alertness without tension, and it conditions your internal state to mirror that balance. Posture works in a similar way. Your spine, shoulders, and chest carry more information than you might think. When you slouch, fold inward, or close off your body, your brain interprets this as a cue for defensiveness or fatigue. These postures reduce respiratory efficiency, airflow, and can actually intensify feelings of anxiety. Conversely, when you stand or sit with an upright spine, open shoulders, and a lifted head, you open the thoracic cavity, allowing for deeper breath and better oxygen exchange. This immediately supports a more regulated state of mind. An upright posture also active areas of the brain associated with positive mood and motivation. The body and brain are in constant dialogue, and your posture can either reinforce fear or stability. People who train themselves to default to open, aligned posture often find they feel stronger even when circumstances are uncertain. This isn't just confidence on the outside, it reshapes how the nervous system interprets threat and safety signals internally. These physical cues also affect how others perceive you, which in turn influences how they treat you. People who exhibit strong eye contact and upright posture are seen as more competent, trustworthy, and calm. That social feedback loop strengthens your own perception of control. When others reflect back calmness and respect, your system becomes even more regulated. In high-stress environments, practicing posture and gaze control becomes a form of micro-regulation. Before a difficult conversation or decision, you can run a quick internal check. Is my spine tall? Are my shoulders relaxed? Am I breathing fully? Is my gaze wide and steady? These are physical switches that can reset your internal response, grounding you in clarity rather than emotional noise. Training your gaze and posture doesn't mean becoming rigid. It means cultivating awareness and flexibility. You learn to adapt your physical presence to state you want to be in, rather than being dragged around by unconscious reactions. Over time, these habits become automatic. You walk into a situation composed not because you're faking confidence, but because your body has rehearsed it so many times that it becomes your default mode. Ultimately, the role of eye gaze and self-regulation is both simple and profound. These are not superficial adjustments. They are access points to your autonomic nervous system, the fastest way to tell your brain, I am in control. And when that message is consistently reinforced, your behavior follows. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop performing calm and start becoming calm. You learn not just to act as if nothing bothers you, but to live in a way where far fewer things actually do. What you do repeatedly becomes who you are. Identity isn't something you're born with fully formed. It's something you build brick by brick through consistent behaviors and patterns over time. If you want to become the kind of person who remains calm under pressure, who acts as if nothing bothers them, then you need to practice behaving that way again and again until it becomes part of your nervous system's default setting. This is not about pretending. It's about aligning action with the kind of internal state you want to make permanent. Repetition is the mechanism that makes it real. The nervous system, especially the brain, is highly plastic. It's constantly being shaped by experience, adapting to what you do often. Every time you perform a behavior, whether it's speaking calmly during conflict, Steadying your breath when tension rises or maintaining eye contact under stress, you're reinforcing a neural circuit. These circuits become stronger with use, just like muscles. What begins as effortful becomes automatic. This is the biological basis of habit formation, and it's how you shift from reacting impulsively to responding deliberately. Most people assume that identity is something you discover, but neuroscience suggests it's more accurate to say that identity is something you create. When you repeat a behavior, especially under stress, you send a message to your brain. This is who I am. The more often that message is reinforced, the more deeply it becomes embedded. Eventually, you no longer have to think about acting calm, focused, or composed. You just are. You've trained your system to respond that way because you've practiced it enough times for it to stick. This principle works in both directions. If you consistently avoid difficult conversations, your brain starts to register avoidance as your default identity. If you lose your temper regularly, that becomes part of your behavioral fingerprint. But the good news is that you can interrupt this process and reshape it at any time. You start by introducing small, intentional actions that reflect the person you want to become. Then you repeat those actions over and over until the identity they represent takes hold. There's a phrase used in behavioral psychology: you become what you practice. It's not a metaphor. It's a biological and psychological truth. The repetition of calm breathing under pressure literally changes the way your brain handles future stress. The repetition of stillness during emotional storms teaches your system that discomfort doesn't need to lead to chaos. This is how you develop the kind of calm presence that others notice, and more importantly, the kind that sustains you internally even when no one else sees it. One of the reasons repetition is so powerful is because it works beneath the level of conscious thought. You don't have to convince yourself intellectually to be calm. You just need to practice calm actions enough times until they become automatic. Over time, these actions become part of your behavioral memory. They stop feeling like techniques and start feeling like you. That's when the identity shift becomes solid. This is also why consistency matters more than intensity. A single moment of composure under pressure is valuable, but it won't shift your baseline. What does shift your baseline is repeated exposure to stress with a trained response. You show up again and again, not perfectly, but persistently. You miss a step, you reset, you overact, you reflect and recalibrate. That's part of the process. What builds identity is not flawless execution, it's relentless repetition. Rituals can be especially helpful here. Small routines like taking a deep breath before entering a room, grounding your feet when seated, or pausing for 2 seconds before speaking in tense moments can become anchors. They don't need to be dramatic. In fact, subtlety is often more sustainable. These rituals act as behavioral cues that reinforce your chosen identity every time you engage them. With enough repetition, they stop being tools and start being traits. Eventually, what once required conscious effort becomes who you are without thinking. You're no longer someone trying to act calm. You've become someone who is calm. You're not pretending that nothing bothers you. You've rewired your system so that fewer things truly do. That transformation is only possible through repetition. There is no shortcut. Identity is not fixed. It's flexible, trainable, and constantly being shaped by what you do. If you want to be resilient, composed, and mentally strong, you don't wait to feel that way before acting the part. You act the part repeatedly until your nervous system adapts. Repetition builds identity. And when you understand that, you stop waiting to change and start practicing change moment by moment, behavior by behavior, breath by breath.